Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Christ versus Cults. Raven here, and today I'm going to go through some of the basics of what you need to watch for when it comes to joining a church or any kind of community that claims to be Christian. Though this channel, I want to go into mostly the cults that people don't know about. Because of that, it's extremely hard to go and just give full explanations of each one. So it takes a lot of time, and I want to make sure people are ready to be on guard about these things, even if I can't cover those individual cults. So I'm starting off with this to just give you the basics. Here's what to watch for. Here's what often happens. So if you're going to join any kind of ministry or church, I'd say watch for this, because I have heard of multiple people going into a church to find out it's a cult, because they're very good at hiding today. There is going to be more and more that know how to put on that facade. For the first thing, let's go to Galatians 1. Verses 6 to 9 say, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. Even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. Now note, this may not be as easy to notice as you might think. A lot of them know how to make it sound like they teach the gospel. But this is what you need to watch for, making sure they're coming and saying it plainly and simply. If they in any way teach this crucial central thing of the gospel in a way that is indirect, unclear, or very complicated and made to sound like a very difficult thing to understand, stay away. The gospel is what should come out fastest, easiest, quickest, and most simply, because that is the starting point. Without that, everything else falls apart. What complexity there is, what confusion comes, should come in all the other little topics and details that come after the gospel. So that's the first thing to watch for. Because if it gets that way, what's probably happening is they're probably saying theirs in a way that sounds good, but they're not teaching the real gospel. And as soon as you start trying to make it sound good, you're going to have to do it indirectly, go a different route, or you're just going to complicate it and make it next to impossible for people to figure out what you're teaching. For the second one, let's go to Colossians 2. Verses 20 to 23 say, If with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, why, as if you were still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, referring to things that all perish as they are used, according to human precepts and teachings. These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion, asceticism, and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. This is something that can usually seem easy to spot, are all the extra rules, regulations, but there's more to it, because it's not just these rules of how you dress, what you eat. That often is a part of it, but there's more, because that is just often a false religion. A cult will control everything it can. So what to watch for is structure and behavior. Do they have a very strict way of structuring the church and their lives? And do the people have a very set way of behaving? If you see a shortage of different personality types, something's wrong. Because this is what a cult does. It doesn't just control you spiritually, it doesn't just control you as far as your morals, it controls you in your entire life, how you live. So watch for that. Because more and more I've seen it where these cults are trying to look normal, look like they don't have these extra rules. But that's by making most of the rules internal. For the third, look at Colossians 2, verse 8. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. One thing to look at that I think is going to be less and less central to choosing a church and really needs to stay central, look at their doctrinal statement. What do they teach? What are their beliefs? What are their views? And there's two things to watch for, and those are exact opposites. First, if it's extremely vague, it says very little, plain and simply, of what they teach. They may talk and blabber about what others teach, but do they stay vague about what they teach? That's the first thing to watch out for. Because if that's the case, there's something they're hiding. There's something they don't want you to know. Second, extremely detailed and specific doctrinal statements. As soon as they do this, you need to watch because there could be a lot of things that don't really matter, that aren't of real significance, that they're putting too high on their priority list. And it means they're going to have their goals and your goals in the wrong place. Fourth, and this is going right off the third. What are their requirements or documents that you have to agree to if you are going to join in their membership? If you're going to become a part of this ministry, church, community, whatever it may be, how much do they require of you? Do you have to sign a lot of agreements? Do you have to agree to a long list of detailed views, beliefs? If so, something's wrong. Because like I said, cults want to control your entire life. This is how they do it. They start by controlling every single inch of your views and beliefs, thus controlling every bit of your motives and purpose. That's how cults work. So be cautious of that. Another thing is in the teaching. Are they really picky about what scripture they use? Are they really particular in how they twist it, how they use it? How often do you see them bringing up a passage, but they're only reading a verse at the end and or the beginning, and there's something in the middle they're leaving out? Or are they just giving you a single verse, but never reading more than that? Do you see them going back and back to the same exact verses every time? Do you not see them broadening the scope of what they read? Those are the things to watch for, because what that means, they're making sure they're picking out those particular parts that are going to agree with what they want to teach. They're going to make sure they leave out context of some to make them sound like they agree with the scripture. And every time you see this, read the context. If they leave out a particular verse or two, read those verses, because there's something there they probably don't want you to see. If not, if you don't see that happening, may not be an issue. But watch for it, because that is something even Satan used when he tempted Christ, to make it look like he's following scripture. That's what a false teacher does. Sixth, and most important, let's go to 2 John chapter 1. Verses 9 to 11 say, "Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting. For whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works." How do they view Jesus Christ? It doesn't matter how good your gospel is. If this isn't right, if your view of Christ isn't right, it's useless. And this is something you have to watch through by everything else I've listed. Because this is what they try to hide most. Because they want you to think they're Christian. But if they do this, if they take a false view of Christ, they're not. So you have to watch how complex or how indirect is their teaching of Christ. How do they act when you speak of him? If you start talking about the real gospel, you talk about who Jesus is, how do they respond? How vaguely do they talk about him? Or how much do they focus on things that don't matter about him? How picky do they get about that stuff? Fourth, how much within what they teach, what they say, what they claim to believe, do they keep him in the center? Because that's what he is. If they don't keep him in the center, something is wrong. Also, when they go to Scripture, do they use it properly when it's speaking about Jesus? They may use so much of Scripture, so much of what's there, and yet just make those tiny tweaks, those tiny twists of what it says about Christ and completely ruin it. So more than anything else, watch how they teach about him. Everything else in this list happens because they do this. Because a cult always comes out of a man or men who want the authority of Jesus, who want to be able to direct our lives the way God should. That's where it comes from. That's why even a church can become a cult. I hope this can help some of you. God bless.